Well, good morning. Prepared a script for us this morning, so let's get right into it. The doubt dividend. Why certainty is a lie. Well, welcome back to the podcast. And I know it's been a while, but if you've been following what we've been doing these past 6 years, you may understand why. We've been deep into some of the biggest questions of our time, peeling back the layers of belief, perception, and reality itself. And today, we're diving straight into it. What is the defining characteristic of this civilizational moment? My apologies. I was thinking about, I forgot to mention where this idea came from. These are the two opening talks from the ARC conference, I think being held over in Ayr in Ireland. And the one shrink from Harvard argued he has his prescription for happiness. And what I'm talking about here, the defining characteristic of this civilizational moment, this is the question that Jordan B. Peterson asked. And my answer is not what you'd expect. So, what is this defining characteristic of this civilizational moment? If you ask me, we're embracing doubt and authenticity. Or at least, we should be. But here's the catch. Most people don't realize it. They think doubt is a problem to be solved, a wound to be patched up with certainty. But I'm here to tell you that certainty is a lie. Doubt isn't a flaw in the system. It is the system. As J. Krishnamurti said, the problem with religion is if people come to it expecting to be given what to believe, given a structure of belief, instead of a framework or a scaffolding to discover that for yourself. None of us are free of this. No one. No politician, no pundit, no so-called thought leader. None have a monopoly on truth. And yet, what do we see? A world of people outsourcing their thinking to whoever tells them what they want to hear. And this brings me to the question everyone's asking, but few are actually thinking about. Who is the enemy? In this case, I'll use the example of Trudeau or Trump, but really, truly, it could be, is it me? Is it you? Is it us? But the question, is it some shadowy force behind the scenes? No matter where you fall politically, chances are you've already been told what to believe. But have you stopped to ask if you're seeing reality or just a narrative? If you want real power, pay attention to reality. This is why I harp on about Carl Jung's place, or Nishitani's basho. Basho in Japanese speaks to this idea of paying attention to reality, being in the right place at the right time. Basho is a combination of characters that go all the way back, not just Japanese, but all the way back to the Chinese Book of Change. And it's the character of a warrior ready for battle and the place of battle. So right time, right place, paying attention. So here's what I mean. We've been told over and over that happiness comes from external things, success, validation, the right ideology. But what if that's wrong? What if true stability, true contentment comes from something deeper? Not just enjoyment or satisfaction, but meaning. Because without contentment, everything else is bankrupt. Think of it like a pension plan. Every day you're making deposits into 4 accounts. Faith, what do you actually believe beyond what you're told to believe? Family, who are your real connections? How do you nurture them? How do you value them? Friendship, are your relationships built on truth or convenience? Is it authentic? As Martin Buber said, without that authentic interaction of I and thou, we can't individuate, as Jung said. And finally, work. Are you building something meaningful or just collecting a paycheck? Are you of value? Are you making a difference? Do you feel that you make a difference? Without contentment in these, that pension plan, it's useless. That was what this Harvard professor presented as his pension plan for happiness. I argue without contentment in any of these, they're all bankrupt. And this brings me back to where we started. We're in an age of radical doubt. But that's not a bad thing. It's an opportunity. Because when we engage with our authentic selves and each other, when we step beyond the narrative handed to us and start thinking for ourselves, we finally grow. We individuate. We embrace amor fati, Nietzsche's love your fate. Not just loving our fate, but loving everything as ordered, even when we don't understand it. That's trust, fides. And in that, we find something deeper than happiness. We find meaning. So the question is, are you ready to wake up? Or are you still letting someone else do your thinking for you? That's it for today's episode. If it hits home, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. If you've been feeling like the world doesn't make sense lately, good. You're finally paying attention. So, long story short, the idea here is when you break down some of the simplest assumptions, like the Trump versus Trudeau, who is the real narcissist, when you actually break down the two of them, even AI failed at this. It actually, the reason why this came up is we were talking about, NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. And I was actually going down this line that, it's a spectrum in the sense that we all tend to this, what would you call it? Tendency for narcissism. You can't blame us. We live in a world that encourages narcissism and discourages the cure or the opposite, which is openness. But as I said, AI dropped this little thing saying like, Trudeau is not, what I was actually talking about was his personality may have been shaped by his parents' traumas. His father and his mother, their relationship when they were young. She got married. She was 22. He was much older. They were just in the middle of the FLQ crisis. It was a whole terrorist situation up here in Canada in 1970. So either they got pregnant during the FLQ crisis or right on the heels of it. And I was just talking about how that can affect our psychology, right? Prenatal and postnatal trauma, never mind having, what would you call it? Genetics. And the AI dropped us one sentence and said, it said that Trudeau, well, he's not a narcissist, but not like in the classic sense like Trump. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, let's just go through this here. Even the AI fell for this, believing what you're told. I said, well, why don't you break down? Because I've been studying this for a few years now. Why don't you break down what makes someone a narcissist? And lo and behold, I didn't have to really give it any prompting. Once I called it on this assumption that Trump is a narcissist and Trudeau isn't, quite shockingly, what came of this is that absolutely it was wrong. Right? Trump is not a classical narcissist by any definition. He may be an egoist. He may be what would you call it? A bombastic, lout, whatever you want to call him. But in a classical sense, it's Justin Trudeau who is the narcissist. I mean, look what's happening here. He's punishing everyone in his country because they rejected him, right? He's going around pretending to be the prime minister when he said he's going to resign, right? He is the poster boy for narcissistic personality disorder, a sociopath. And arguably, sadly, it's the case I've been making my entire life. AI agrees that since Justin has never talked about his healing. I mean, look at his wife. His wife wrote a book all about emotional healing and the damage of, emotionally broken men. It makes the case that Justin Trudeau has never healed from his trauma, his parental trauma. If you look up how he was raised, it's absolutely tragic. Raised by nannies. He only saw his mom once in a blue moon because she was partying 2 weeks of the month at Studio 54. And the other 2 weeks a month, she was supposedly coming home. But The truth is, she was so erratic and so dangerous that they actually kept the kids away from her. But she gave an interview recently saying that she was raising these kids. Thank gosh she wasn't. But the absent parent can be enough to make kids into a traumatized, nightmarish mess. And so I argue, once again, we need to train our people about trauma before it happens. Because, well, there's an example of there's almost no healing that without changing our entire dynamic of society, right? The AI got it wrong and tried to explain away why Trudeau could be damaged and traumatized because his father was distant and unavailable, right? And the AI tried to have a whole discussion about how is this because of our thought leaders, pulled away? But no, that's absolutely wrong because, again, Margaret Trudeau recently gave an interview talking about how important it was work-life balance and all this, talking about her son. Excuse me. She's the last person I can give an example, a member of my family with multiple failed marriages, no examples of successful relationships in their life with anybody really. And yet they're the first person to criticize other people's relationships. Right? It's like, seriously, Margaret, keep your advice to yourself because arguably, wow, the best thing that happened for her children was that, she wasn't around in their formative years because arguably they would have been so much worse off. And again, this is not coming from a place of anger or toxin. This is just simply the truth that in a country that only recognized PTSD in 2018 and is still yet to recognize complex trauma and multi-generational trauma, like just look at what Trudeau's been doing to the Indigenous people of Canada. He keeps talking about how he wants to stop the trauma, but he keeps re-traumatizing them over and over again. All we have to do is stop and take a look, whether it's ourselves or others. We can see that we are our greatest enemy, ourselves and each other, because we lack authenticity. And how do we reach that? It's through doubt, right? I've said this before. I boiled down Buddhism to a simple phrase. Don't be a jerk. Are you being a jerk? Repeat. That's the doubt, right? That's the last thing that Dunning-Kruger. Not that newbies think they know everything, but worse than them are these experts who don't believe they have any flaws or can be flawed, when in reality, the greatest guide is doubt. I mean, how can you ever want to understand something until you admit that you don't understand? And as Thomas Merton said, what we really need to learn to do is not fight and wrestle with these questions. It's to be able to sit with the answers, but worse, sometimes sitting with questions that don't have answers. Right? I said this to a young lad who has great potential. One of the hardest things for us to deal on is the truth that no matter how much we may learn in this world, this is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. No matter how much we may learn in this world, true wisdom is knowing that you're never going to know it all. Or even funnier, what I like to joke at is some of us tend to forget more than what others will ever learn. So on that note, may the road rise up to meet you. It's an old Irish saying that until I began studying this stuff, I never really truly understood. It's this idea of amor fati, to love your fate. May the road rise up to meet you. May you rise to meet the challenge. And in so doing, see yourself change, to see change. Right? This idea of a radical change, it only comes about when we truly challenge ourselves. We've seen it in memory theory that proves that memories that truly last are the ones that we really had to work for. Well, that's growth. That's human growth. I've said this before, you can take it from Goggins. He says, you're either growing or you're atrophying. And that's the South, baby.